We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to R.O.G, Return on Generosity, a podcast celebrating generosity at work. Not financial giving, giving valuable time, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration.
Welcome to Return on Generosity. I'm Susan Jim Davis. I'm your host today. And what can I say about my guest today? I mean, I actually had to write down all of her accolades, so I'm going to try to get them. But she is an anchor, a host, a correspondent, a professor, a producer, a speaker. But probably most importantly, she is just such a great sister friend. She is a sister from another mother. I love her. Why don't we just record me talking about how much of a fan I am of you, May Lee? But I want to welcome you. I love the fact that I'm finally interviewing you because you're always interviewing other people. So this is a real thrill to have you.
Okay, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. And it's just so weird that you're interviewing me, Susan, because we are such soulmates, total sisters. We're silver sisters, of course. So, I mean, this is going to be just more of a chit chat between girlfriends because that's how I feel, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just hope that I got to have my swear jar next to me because, I'm going to try to make this as PG-13 as possible, which is the only difference between the two of us when we talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is going to be fun and a conversation. As you know, the podcast is Return on Generosity. And, when I was asked to do this, stepping in for Shannon Cassidy, you're the first person that came up because
Sweet.
You are the definition of generosity in so many different ways, which I'm not going to talk about now because then it won't let you talk about it, which would be kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do here. But
I'm so flattered that I'm the first person you thought of when it comes to generosity. Yeah. That's amazing to me. So thank you for that.
Of course. And, I just feel like we've always had a connection, and probably because we do share a lot. Mm. And, you and I were talking the other day about immigrants, right? We come from immigrant families.
That's right.
And so when I think of May Lee, I think of child of immigrants, among other things. Mm-hmm. And we shared the fact that we think that being immigrant parents shows like the ultimate sacrifice and act of generosity because it's not about them at all.
Without a doubt.
It's about what they're willing to do for their future, and their future is their family.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about your amazing parents and their generosity.
Yeah, I mean, it is, we are part of a unique club, right, of children of immigrants. And so my parents immigrated from Korea. And my father was one of the few who was able to come in 1965 when JFK allowed for the immigration of those who had special skills, talents. And so he opened up immigration. And so my father was able to come in during that time because my father was a doctor and he was studying to be a psychiatrist. So he came, and then he brought my mom and my brother over, and then I was born in the States. So American citizen, not, born here. And so for them, they were obviously coming to the United States for a better life for everyone. But then actually my father decided to go back to Korea to use his psychiatric skills because psychiatry was so unknown in Korea. I think he was a 5 trained psychiatrist at the time.
5 total.
Yeah. To go back to Korea and actually practice. So their intention, believe it or not, was to stay there. But in the late 60s, when we moved back, so I was only a baby, so like a year and a half, there was still so much political upheaval and uncertainty. And remember, back then, Korea was still a developing country. Nothing like it is now.
Nothing like it is now.
No,
crazy.
No, it's like now crazy modern, right?
Yes, yes.
So my parents then, and this is where the sacrifice happens, of course, they chose to come back to the States because they were so afraid of what might happen. And they're afraid that their kids, would be subjected to a terrible future. And so my father
Sure.
gave up a lot, that he had already sort of started in Korea as a psychiatrist, as one of the preeminent psychiatrists, to come back to the States and really start again. Luckily, because he was a trained psychiatrist, he was able to, kind of find work. But that's why they came back to the States, because of us, really, because of us. So I
Yeah.
think about, like, if I had stayed in Korea, and this was again 1969, 1970, as a girl back then, I would have had a very different life. Very
True.
different life. I would have probably been married at some point, had kids, and career probably wasn't going to be something that was in the cards, because back then still it was very traditional. So
And
yeah,
then they landed like I think ultimately you grew up in Ohio, which
Ohio.
is of course, I'm sure, not very diverse, at least at that time.
No,
Here you are, Korean kid. Here
yeah,
they are, immigrants.
yeah, yeah. No,
Life
it
life is
was,
not easy. We
yeah.
grew
And
up
people
similarly.
always ask me, like, why the hell did your parents end up in Ohio? And it's
Yeah.
a funny thing, but believe it or not, there were a lot of Korean doctors who ended up in
Oh.
Ohio. And the reason why is because there are lots of different universities in Ohio, like big ones. So
Oh,
for instance,
sure.
I was born at the Ohio State University Medical Center. So there was Ohio State, but then there were big, like, cities that had hospitals that needed doctors, like Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton. So they did recruit a lot of immigrant doctors, right, to these positions.
But it can't have been easy. I mean, I grew up similarly in central Pennsylvania, and here you are, this kid that doesn't look like anybody. You're not like your
No.
typical Ohioan of that time, right? I mean,
Oh God,
what,
no. I stuck out like a sore
I
thumb.
mean, what was that like?
Yeah. So I stuck out like a sore thumb. And remember, because we had moved back from Korea, I didn't speak any English. My first learned
Right, so
language was
language
Korean.
was an issue.
So I go to school, and my mom tells me the story when I was going to kindergarten for the first day, and she was holding my hand going to school. And I said to her in Korean, Mommy, what are the kids going to say when they see this girl walk in with black hair? Right. So I already knew I was going
As
to,
a little child.
as a little child, like I was like 5 or 4 years old,
Yeah,
right? As a
yeah.
little child, I
Yeah.
already knew I was going to be different, and I already had the fear that I was going to be treated differently, right? So that was the setup. That's how I first was introduced to that life, and my first question of identity started that young, right? And so because of that, of course, I was feeling very insecure about who I was. I hated being Asian. I hated being Korean. I didn't want to be Asian. I
Yeah, you
wanted to
just
have,
want to be like everyone else.
yeah, I wanted to have blonde hair. I even asked my mom at one point, can I change my name to Mary? Because it was more American. And so,
Right.
yeah, I definitely struggled through all of that identity. Of course, the bullying, of course, the name calling, of course, the racism. And it was part of my childhood.
Now, typically, when kids are in that situation, one of the ways they get kind of integrated into life there would be to like do activities, and you did dance, which
I did a lot.
one would think that's
Yeah.
one thing you did. One would think that would have allowed you that inroad into being a normal kid in an Ohio school. But you talk about a particular instance. I really want you to
Yeah, no,
talk about
no.
it because of its impact on you.
I did
So
share
what
the story with
happened
you
to
privately
the
because
beautiful,
it's a really
beautiful May
powerful,
dancer?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a really powerful story that really illustrates kind of how, when you grow up in a society that, wants you to conform and you're different, how it tries to push you down. Right. And so I took ballet, and I loved it. I loved it. And I was pretty good. And so I think I was around maybe 8 at the time, maybe 9. And I was in this ballet class. And of course, I was the only, kid of color. Um, and so I was quite good compared to the rest of the class. And at one point I did, I was kind of doing the routine, and the older woman teacher, a white woman, said to me, "You need to calm down. You need to blend in a little bit more. You shouldn't be so good." And imagine, I'm 59 years old. And I still remember that story as clear as day, as if it happened yesterday, because it had such an impact on me, such a negative impact on me, because I was being told, you
Yeah.
can't stand out in the crowd, from the crowd. You need to
And
blend
think
in.
about what that, what is she really saying is like, cover up your brilliance.
Yeah, cover
You
it
know,
because, yeah,
don't be as great as you can be, which
and
is
you
what,
shouldn't be because you're not the norm, right?
yeah. Now, if you
Basically,
look differently,
yeah, it was racist. I mean, I'll
sure.
call it out. She was being racist. She didn't want this little Asian girl to be better than the other girls. And so she was trying to keep me down. She was trying to push me down. And so, I remember that story, and it impacted me obviously for a while, because I was like, oh my God, I guess I should just be silent. I guess I should be invisible. And so things like that happened throughout my childhood. And now I think back on all those incidents and I'm like, wow, it did have an impact on me. Thank God I was able to break out of it. But can you imagine if I
Yes.
didn't?
Okay. So there's a very unique thing about being Korean, and
Mm,
that is the concept of Han, which it
yeah,
doesn't have an English equivalent, but
no,
it's about sort of that deep seated sadness
yeah,
and sense of tragedy and deprivation and
suffering.
pain and sorrow and suffering that
Yeah,
Koreans have. So the reason I'm saying this, May, is on top of your life experiences, you have this Han
yeah,
and your life experiences like that one where you were told to stop being brilliant, like when you were 5 years old and you knew right away there was going to be a difficult situation presented to you because of who you were, who you
yep.
are. How did that combine? I mean, that had to have combined to create, to be honest with you, the generosity that you have, the desire to make things better, the desire to
Yeah,
help others, to be a bridge to fix. I mean, talk
exactly.
about that. I really want to hear
It's
that.
so interesting because, you could go one of two ways with the experiences that you and I have had, right? And,
Yeah.
it was throughout my childhood, it was throughout my teen years, and then it was throughout my career too as a journalist, because I got a lot of pushback, a lot of racism and all of that as a Asian female in the broadcast TV business. It built up a lot of harm, of course, a lot of struggle, a lot
More
of stuff,
Han.
and some resentment, clearly. So it could have gone one way, which is for me to be resentful for the rest of my life and just want vengeance, right? And be completely
Yeah.
selfish and just be like, screw all of you, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was I took that pain and suffering as life lessons for sure. And it built character. And I really mean that, because I was exposed to that kind of negativity and resistance so early on. I learned from it. I got very early lessons from all of those experiences, and it toughened me up for sure. But it got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to use this to hurt myself. I'm going to use it to empower myself. I'm going to make it a superpower almost of knowledge and life experience, so then I can use it in a positive way. Well, what ended up happening was I became a journalist. I became a
Yeah.
journalist who cared about stories. I cared about other people. I cared about suffering and struggle. I wanted to be the voice for the voiceless. And that's what a journalist job should be. We should be about reporting truth and fact and injustice. And now I know, after all these years, where that fire came from.
I love the fact that your first step was, I need to work on myself,
Yeah.
right? So this Han, this rage, this pain, this
Yeah.
sorrow, how do I turn this into something that can be used for good within myself first?
First, let me say that it wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy, and I still
Yeah.
sometimes struggle, with the rage, and especially now. I mean, there's so much happening
Yeah.
in this world that it's maddening and it's frustrating, obviously, and especially the attacks against journalism and free press and all of that.
Of course.
So we're living in unprecedented times. I know we overuse that now, but it's because it's true. But yeah, so it's not easy to take that rage and turn it, and reverse it and turn it into something positive. But you know, I think for me, I knew that it was going to be self-destructive if I just like held on to that
Mm.
rage and just let it fester. and destroy me, because who's going to be hurt at the end of the day? Just me. Not the people who were mean to me,
Yeah.
not the people who tried to keep me down, right? So what's the best revenge? To be successful, and then to be able to use all of those negative experiences to hopefully, make the world a better place, inform people, make a difference. And
Yeah.
because I've been on all of these major networks, CNN, CNBC, ABC, I even work for Oprah. I saw the fruits of my labor. I saw what, the power of my voice and storytelling and sharing my life experiences can do, to make that positive effect, to change somebody's life, to, even empower kind of myself and my identity even more. It took a
Yeah.
while though.
Let's go back to sort of where this compassion comes from, because ultimately that is what I see in you,
Mm,
a compassionate advocate. You're not just an intellectual advocate, let's talk about the issues, but
yeah,
you're like making actual personal human connections with people and trying to make a meaningful impact on them.
yeah,
And that to me is the roots are in compassion. And I think of the time that you lost your dad
yeah.
and how that must have been so mind blowing and awful
Yeah,
and tragic. I think there's also that. There's the lived experience being a minority and different, but then there's the, hey, I know what matters in life, right? And so, do you mind sharing about your dad?
no,
Like,
no, and I want to, because I want to always honor my father, because of, again, because of all the sacrifices he made for his family, and just the struggles he went through. Um, but yeah, this happened 12 years ago, 13 years ago now. Um, I had been overseas for many, many years working as a journalist in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. So I was away for, a big chunk of my life. And then I went away to college. I even went away to high school. So I had been away for so long that I thought I have to come back stateside, because my parents were getting older. And I thought, I have missed a lot of time with them. So it's time to go back so I can spend some quality time with them. And so they had moved from Ohio to California, during the time I was in Singapore. And so I decided, okay, I'm going back. And so I did in 2010. And 1 year later, my father was killed by a 16-year-old driver. This was an out of body experience for me. And so that loss, and that's the suddenness of that loss,
of course.
really impacted me for obvious reasons. But it teaches you the lesson, the obvious lesson of, you never know when life will be taken away.
Hold your dear one, your dearest loved ones near you. Don't delay
Don't
the
delay.
opportunity
Please
to
don't
be
delay.
with the people you love. I mean,
And if you
that's
can't be with them,
huge.
please tell them how much you care about them. Please,
Yeah.
just convey that. Because I say to myself, and I say to other people, if I could only have 5 minutes with my dad, if I could only
Exactly.
just get 5 minutes with him, right? Because I
Yeah.
never got a chance to say these things, right? And so it just chokes me up still. It's just like I can't. I wish. And so I tell people, please, especially if you have elderly parents, you don't know, and all they want to do is be
Yeah.
happy for you and support you. And you got to know, you got to let them know how
But
much.
that to me is you're very much who you are, your identity you purposely put out there
Yeah,
and dare people to challenge you for who you are.
yeah,
But then there's a part of you, that's one part of you. The other part of you is this open heart, that this generous spirit that says, I'm going to take care of you.
the Koreans, we have very thick skin, and we had to develop this character of fighting, constantly fighting for our rights, for our lives, for our survival. So it's in our DNA to be like this. So then you get
Yes.
people like us who are grateful for the sacrifices that our parents, and our grandparents made. And now we take that on, saying, well, then we're going to keep fighting for others
Yes.
as well.
Well, there's this concept of intergenerational trauma, which I
For
don't think a lot of
sure.
people who aren't us don't
Yes.
understand. But for
Yes.
many marginalized people in this
Yes.
country, they bring with them the amazing richness of their culture and the beauty of their heritage, but they also bring trauma to the shores. And then they experience trauma here. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like a double, quadruple, gigantic amount of trauma. And it is what makes us who we are.
Yep.
Right. So,
Yep.
whenever you hear about the Asian stereotypes, the meek and mild and compliant and polite and good at science, play the violin, some of these things really don't apply to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of
The
them
violin,
do.
definitely.
Yeah.
But Koreans,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, not the meek and the mild.
Yeah.
So it's
Remember,
really interesting.
some of that, the reason why some Asians keep to themselves and are quiet, it's not because they're meek. It's because of this intergenerational trauma. Take, for instance, the
Yeah,
Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during the war. That is trauma, right? That is
of
trauma
course.
that is still kind of fresh, right? So they just didn't want to talk about it, right? Their
Yeah.
silence shouldn't be seen as meek. It's because they were traumatized that they don't want to talk about it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And also, they're some of our biggest activists
yeah,
in the community, AAPI community, are Japanese Americans because they're like you, May. They're like, never again.
never
And we
again.
are going to fight and die on this hill of
Right,
justice and equality for everybody.
right.
That is our hill.
That's right.
That is your hill. Talk a little more about this whole experience of being a journalist of color, a woman of color in journalism, because right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is under attack. Apparently, it's discrimination, but the reality is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is good for everybody, right? We all grow, and we all
Yeah,
are successful if everybody is part of the mix,
that's
and
right.
we include everybody in this in the places we are. So tell, like, only woman, only person of color, Asian.
Yeah.
You had an amazing career. What was it like? Because I know you had to break through a lot of barriers.
Yeah, and the beginnings of my career, I couldn't have started at a worse time to try to be a television news reporter, because this was the late 80s. I started in college, getting internship and things like that. And then when I wanted to first get my first on-air job, right? Back then we still had tapes, right? So you'd send out these resume tapes to all the different stations to try to get your first gig. And this
Oh,
was
wow.
1989 when I started this hunt. And that was the height of Japan bashing in the US. Because that's
Oh, is that the car industry?
yeah,
Because of the car industry.
because the
That's also when
Japan
Vincent
was
Chin
being
happened, right?
so Japan was being accused of car dumping here in the US, the cheap cars compared to the US cars. And then they were buying up things like Rockefeller Center and Pebble Beach, all these iconic properties in the US. So there was a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
Japan hate at that time. But of course that translates into Asian hate because they don't know the difference, right? Like they look at me and they're like, oh, you must be Japanese. So nobody wanted to hire me. I sent out 60 plus tapes all across the country in the tiniest markets, tiniest little towns where I probably would have been killed if I went there, right? But
Oh,
I
my
was
gosh.
and I couldn't get a job and I knew why. It was because I was Asian. Nobody
Anti-Asian hate, everybody. Didn't just start
Nobody wanted
recently.
to put an Asian face on TV at the time, right? So I almost gave up before I even started my career. And then
Yeah.
finally, a tiny little station in Redding, California, gave me a break, and hired me as a
Where is Reading? I don't even know
Redding
there.
is north of Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I got my
Small
small.
market.
Oh yeah, I mean this is how you start in this business anyway. You got to kind of start in a small market and work your way up.
Sure.
And so I
Sure.
started there, and that was the break I needed. And then from there, I was able to kind of go from market to market. But all along the way, of course, I was seen as the other and, first Asian, of course, at every station I went to. I went to Dayton, Ohio, which is where I grew up. It was just coincidental that I happened to do an internship a couple years prior in college. And then I applied to go to that station from Reading, and they hired me. But I was, back in Dayton, got into more than one run-in with people when I was out in the field reporting, being called all sorts of chink, Jap, gook, go back to your country, go back to where you came from, all of that stuff, constantly. And then I finally got out of there and went overseas for the first time. But again, throughout my adult life, throughout my career, I still was faced with the otherism, and being fully accepted. Yeah.
So did it get better when you went out of this country? I mean, was that a kinder environment for people that look like us?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. For the most part, yes, because I'm Asian. But it's interesting when you go to Asia as a Asian American, especially back then. This was still the 90s when I went to Japan first. And I went to work for NHK, which is the sort of the BBC of Japan. So it's public broadcaster, government funded, but the biggest, media entity in Japan for sure. And even in Asia, it's huge, huge presence. So because I was Asian American and Korean American, going to Japan was interesting because as some of you may know or may not, Korea and Japan have sort of a interesting relationship historically, because Japan, of course, colonized Korea for many years. And so there's still, no love lost, let's put it that way, right? And so when I went, I realized that the old school Japanese, they didn't like me very much when they found out I was Korean. So there was a little bit of discrimination for me there too. And because Japan was still a traditional culture back then, even in the 90s, because I was a Korean woman, they're like, I would walk in sometimes to interview like a very powerful chairman. This actually did happen. Walked in to interview a very powerful chairman of a huge conglomerate. And I walk in with my Japanese producer who spoke Japanese. She would be my translator. And we both walk in and he looks at both of us. He's like, "Where's the reporter?" And she said to him, "Well, it's her." And the look of disgust on his face was incredible. And during the entire interview, he did not make eye contact with me the whole interview. So
luckily you had that thick skin from the United States.
Oh yeah.
You brought that over.
I knew what was happening.
To be able to manage
I knew what was happening. But the Japanese producer, I told her afterwards, I really wish you didn't tell him I was Korean.
Do you think, all these diversity efforts are being villainized, but do you think that it helped you in your career when you had a powerful person be your advocate, or did you, how do you see sort of the allyship, the sponsorship? How do you see some of these programs even? Because I know that for you and I, we didn't have a lot of programs back then.
No, none.
How do you see some of those ways in which we can make this place, wherever we find ourselves, more inclusive? I mean, how important is that? Especially that since we didn't have that, how important is that? I mean,
I think it's incredibly important because I can speak from experience. I didn't have that. I didn't have any of that. There's nobody in my industry who was like me, who looked like me, nobody on TV who looked like me. The one and only person was Connie Chung, and she's the most famous because she was the one and only. But besides that, and because she, and I read her book, right? Her memoir that came out recently, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But, she even admits because she was the one and only, she had to fight for herself. She had no capacity to fight for anybody else, right? Because there's no room. So, we hear this term scarcity mentality, when it comes to, marginalized communities, right? Especially in my business at that time, there was major scarcity mentality. There was one spot only. And that was for one person of color, not just Asian, anybody of color.
Which just causes infighting.
Exactly. And that infighting and that pitting against the minorities, which is the model minority myth, right? It was like pitting Asians against the Black community, so that was happening in my business. So because of that scarcity mentality, anybody in a position on television who was Asian, so few of us, there was no room, to even try to mentor. Now, I was lucky. I had one mentor who tried to help me out in San Francisco when I was a little production assistant. Sherry Hu, she was a reporter there, and she was generous. And I will always call her out. She was generous towards me because she knew how hard it was. She knew.
And so I think that's why you kind of have to institutionalize these things, because they're not going to happen naturally. People aren't going to be like, hey, let me see if I can find somebody that has a different perspective than me, that may have had a different life experience.
Right.
That's a lot. So these programs are really meant to kind of like learn from our experience. It doesn't work naturally. You don't want to be that only person trying to break down barriers.
Right.
That we need each other. We need people, and we need programs that will allow people to just be good at what they do and get chosen on the basis of merit, right?
Yes. Okay, that's bingo, ding, 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 ding. So when people knock down DEI efforts, what pisses me off is they think we're just being handed, favor with no skills. Like we're just stupid as and we're just being given the job. That's not what we want. None of us want that. Right?
No, we don't want that.
We want to be hired because we are well qualified and we are a great candidate for the job. All right. But the problem is when the door is not even cracked open because it's been closed for so long, we just want the opportunity. We just want that door to be cracked open to be
We want to be seen.
Yes.
We want to be seen.
But then we are going to bring the skill set to the table. We want to be hired because we are good at what we do. Right?
Yes.
But I hate when people try to flip DEI efforts and diversity efforts. Oh, they suck, but it's because they're Black. It's because they're Asian. What?
No,
that's not why. And that's not what we want. That's not what
it's
we're
equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Equal opportunity. And like one thing that you do among many things in that area is that you fill gaps. Because part of this is about how do we create awareness and knowledge and information that can then build into good decisions. And so I'm looking at this course that you created, Evolution of Asian Americans and the Media.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You created that because there was nothing like that.
Necessity. Yes.
And why was that important, May? Like, who cares about Asians in the media?
So, here's the thing. I created that course out of necessity during anti-Asian hate and during COVID. Right? Because I saw the explosion, what was happening. And I had to ask myself, of course, as a journalist, I was like, okay, why is this happening? And at the core of it was because there was a lack of education and historical reference when it came to the Asian American experience and who we are in this country. Right. And so when I realized that, I was like, okay, and it's also the media over the course of decades that the media had gotten it wrong oftentimes about Asians and immigrants and our experience, right? And so I realized as a journalist, and I was teaching journalism at the time at USC, I'm like, I got to figure out a course that really breaks down the history of the Asian American experience, but then connect that to how media got it wrong, but then got it right also, right? And how that narrative was created that has lasted to this day. Right.
Right.
And that narrative, unfortunately, has been more wrong than right. Right. So as a journalism professor, I had to teach my students, okay, this is history and that this is why it's important, but it's also why it's important that media and journalism, needs to get it right. Right.
Right.
So that's why I created that course. And I even learned so much. I'm like, man, I didn't even know half this stuff happened in history. But then to kind of associate it with, journalism and how media, even film, television, all those things, created these incorrect stereotypes and narratives. And so to me, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And that's why I created the course. I'm like, well, nothing like this exists at USC Annenberg. And so I'll do it. And thankfully, they're very supportive and they allowed me to do it. Again, I took the opportunity because the timing was right, because anti-Asian hate was happening, COVID was happening. And they're like, man,
Yep.
we need to let her do this because it's necessary.
And I think it's really what I am really taking from that, May, is so many things. But one is we don't even know our own history.
No.
AANHPIs in
That's
this
right.
country. And
That's
so
right.
that's something that I think we need to take time to do, to understand what is our history in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And it will blow your mind, because you'll be like, I didn't even know any of that, because it's never been in any classroom of mine. I've never had a course
Not our
that
generation,
has
my God.
included anything meaningful about my history, my people's history in this country.
No.
Secondly, I think all Americans would benefit from knowing what real history is, because full histories are important for us to understand each other and connect to one another as human beings. And then I think the whole issue of media and entertainment perpetuating some of the stereotypes or encouraging bias,
Yep.
it makes us realize that we have a responsibility. I mean, if we are journalists, if we are in the entertainment industry and for consumers, we need to really make sure that we challenge images and depictions that are just downright wrong and dangerous and harmful.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
you pack that all in a course.
I did.
I want to take that course. Everybody should take that course.
You know what?
You should tape it.
It was a great course because it was very it was always evolving, which was fascinating to me because because I started the course during when all this stuff was happening in the country, and all the anti-Asian hate. I could wrap in all the current events with his history and relate it and say, look, history is repeating itself, but the reaction, here's the thing about generosity. And when it comes to informing and educating, it's amazing when you get such a positive, immediate response from students. And my students, they were mostly Asian, kind of makes sense. But I had some non-Asians take the course, which I was very grateful for because, here are some students who are willing to learn about something totally different to them.
Right.
The fact that students would tell me, oh my God, Professor Lee, I never knew any of this. And now I understand why I feel the way I do. Right. It impacted them so deeply and personally, and then it empowered them. I mean, I had so many students say, I feel so much more informed about my history, my identity, and it's made me more proud. It's made me want to speak up more. I mean, it really, the reactions I got were really, really amazing. And I was so grateful for that because that's what you want to do.
Well, and again, an example of generosity, because you didn't have to do that. You could have just gone in and checked the box and be a professor and go home and have a glass of wine and relax with your loved ones. But instead you did this course and then you went home and had a glass of wine and relaxed with your loved ones.
That's right. Yeah.
But the concept of filling gaps is such a thing in your life. And speaking of another filling in of gaps, talk about shoes off inside. And first of all, about the concept.
Yeah.
I need everybody to begin this practice, which is take your shoes off before you come inside the house, which is something my dad would yell at us about constantly. Take your shoes off. Take your shoes off. Let's talk about it.
About that first, just a sec. Let's just talk about the concept.
We have to talk about this.
Okay.
So important.
Asians, we just do this. This is just a thing, right? But it shouldn't just be an Asian thing. It's just sanitary. Okay, you're walking around all over town on these dirty streets that are never clean, sidewalks that people are peeing on, dogs are peeing on. I mean, really, let's be realistic.
Serious, let's be really
spitting.
Realistic.
And then you walk into your house, your bedroom, your bathroom with these same shoes. I don't get it. I think it's disgusting.
I don't get it either. Okay. Sometimes people get on their bed and they have the shoes on.
That's the
and I'm like, take the shoes off.
Right.
My father's voice is in my head.
Yeah. So, we immediately take our shoes off at the door.
Oh, have to.
And I always wear slippers. I mean, people are like, I don't want to wear just bare feet. And that's why you have slippers. Okay. We have winter
We have a whole box of slippers for guests in my house.
We have winter slippers. We have summer slippers. So anyway, so that's the whole concept that shoes off means, of
Yes.
course, to our culture. But I think everybody should do it. I mean, it's just like no question. Anyway,
Yeah. Best practices.
best practices, exactly. So, so we have a podcast called Shoes Off Inside, MKT, and MKT stands for May, Kelly, and Tamlin, because my two co-hosts are Kelly Hu and Tamlin Tamita, two legendary Hollywood actresses, AAPI. Everybody knows them. They're pioneers as well, in Hollywood. And so the three of us, I had first started my own podcast at the very start of 2020. During COVID, before COVID, and it was called the May Lee Show.
May Lee Show.
I know,
Yeah.
creative title. But when COVID started and anti-Asian hate started, I started pivoting that podcast to really address what was going on, right? And be very vocal about the anti-Asian hate, the reasons why it was happening, and calling things out, trying to inform people, getting medical experts on. I mean, I pivoted the whole show to cover issues like that. And then after COVID, I was like, okay, maybe I need to make it into a show that sort of talks about Asian issues, but also maybe women's issues, maybe more mature women's issues. And again, break the stereotype of Asian women, older Asian women, the fact that we ain't dead yet. We got a lot of fire. And when you get older as a woman, as most older women know, you don't give a crap about people's judgment, or you don't watch what you say anymore because you're free.
So true.
So Kelly, Tamlin, and I are within the same age group. We all are Asian women. We all have broken ceilings, glass ceilings. Yeah, exactly.
We've got a little of this going
all
on here.
Silver sisters. And we decided, let's do a show together. And let's call it Shoes Off Inside.
I love it.
Because it has the, sort of obviously the Asian theme to it. And it, also we thought, the idea of shoes off inside means come on into our living rooms, take your shoes off, get comfortable, and let's have a real chat about
Be
stuff.
welcome.
Be welcome, right?
Be yourself.
Just open up and talk about whatever you want. And so that program has been on for 2 years now, and we love doing it. I mean, it's almost like a public service because it's not like we're making any money off of it. But we do it because we enjoy having these conversations. We enjoy covering a variety of topics, everything from menopause to politics. I mean, literally, that's
yeah, sure. Relevant issues.
Relevant issues.
Right. Sisterhood issues.
Sisterhood issues. And approach with a lot of honesty. Because again, we don't care about judgment. We're not beholden to anyone. We're not a part of any kind of institution. So we're free to kind of, speak openly.
And I think the bigger picture on that is that all three of you are combining your reputation and your fame and creating a platform for helping others.
Yeah.
As we try to process life, as we try to process what's going on right now in our country, as we're trying to just process womanhood. You don't have to use your platform that way, but you're using your platform that way.
Yeah, no, we are. And I think it's more important than ever because, being a woman now is a liability almost, right? Let's be honest. We're going backwards when it comes to being female and having freedom and rights and even voting, right? There's some legislations that being considered where if your married name doesn't match your birth name, they're going to try to, prevent you from voting. So right. These are things that we have to pay attention to. And if we can yes, you're right, Susan. If we can use our platform and our fame and our recognition to speak out about these issues that matter to everyone, right? I mean, and this is where I say I get disappointed with people who do have this power to speak up because they have a huge platform and they're recognized and they're not saying a dumb word. And it's cowardice. To me, it's cowardice. But I want to say, I get it. No, I don't. Actually,
you're kind of judgy.
I'm not very forgiving that way.
You're judgy.
I am judgy. And I think justifiably. This is when I say I'm justifiably judgy. The reason why is because we are at a crucial time, truly at a
Yeah.
crucial time. And you care more about your job. Okay, maybe you have bills to pay, but when you're like really well off and really famous and you could spare maybe a little bit of pushback, but it's for the greater good. I don't get why you don't speak up. I don't get why you don't use your platform to try to help other people when it's disastrous right now. I don't get it. Don't get it.
On the other side of it is the fact that ordinary people have been creating movements in this country or in the world.
That's right.
So if they could do it, we need to do it. We need to create those movements of good. I think every one of us really needs to do that because it takes all of us to do that.
It will,
doesn't it? I mean,
it will take
we have to be in solidarity. We have to be in coalition with one another. We need to speak up for not only, what I'm disappointed in is like the courses that you teach and maybe your podcast and other areas where people are talking about their so-called their issue, which by the way is our issue because we're all human beings.
That's right.
It's world community here. That there aren't enough of us tuning into those platforms that are driven by other people not like us.
Yeah.
We should all be engaged in these conversations together in all of our platforms. We should be cross-pollinating our platforms. 100%. Shouldn't we? I mean,
yes.
Building that world community, of conversation and connection.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's ideal.
And I'm glad you said that because I think at times like this, and, this happened kind of during anti-Asian hate a little bit, but I realized, and that's the other reason I did that course is because I felt like, everybody's siloed. Everybody stays in their corners because it's safe, right? And here's the thing, and I always taught my journalism students this, being a journalist, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's our job. We have to put ourselves in total discomfort, meaning we got to go to places, talk to people, put ourselves in situations that are very uncomfortable. That's the way we get the story. That's the way we get the truth, oftentimes, right?
You have to face it.
You have to face it, and you have to be willing to stay in it, be able to able to get the truth and the facts and the story. Well, that's the way it works. I think overall is like, because we're so siloed, we just stay in our little comfort zone, in our little bubbles where we don't want to reach out to some stranger or in another community that you don't understand. One of the most powerful assignments I would give my journalism students, I would make them go interview somebody outside of their comfort zone. And I said, that means someone who's not your color, maybe not your religion, maybe not your gender or not your sexuality, something where it's like, it's completely out of your comfort zone. You go interview that person and you come back, you come back with an article, a profile piece.
I think that's a good set of advice for anybody living in the world, which is to say your assignment as a human being is to spend a little time with somebody or some people who are not like you.
That's right.
I want you to do the research on those people, that culture. I want you to dig in and learn on your own, do your homework, and then go out and have experiences with people who are not like you.
And you will come back so surprised, like so wonderfully surprised. Every student would come back and tell me it was an amazing assignment. Every single one would be like, oh my God, professor, I learned so much. I had no idea. They would be like, I was really nervous. I was scared. But they would like come back going, it was such an amazing experience.
Okay, human beings who are listening, that is your homework assignment. Because I think that when we do that, when we step out of our comfort zone, when we do our homework, we don't ask people to teach us about them. We do our part.
Yeah.
And then we make that actual connection with people. We have a chance at overcoming racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, bigotry, intolerance,
even
ignorance.
Honestly,
that's it. I think that's it.
But that's almost asking too much. So I will make it even easier. I will make it even
easier. I made it complicated.
You don't even have to do your homework. Okay. If you're too lazy, that's okay. Don't even do the homework, but just go out there and try to like meet somebody and just be like humble and say, you know what? I know nothing about you and your culture.
Yeah. I
Can you
got you.
tell me something? You know what I mean? I'll give you an example that I think maybe people will relate to. This is a great example. So remember the Super Bowl. Kendrick Lamar was this halftime show, right? And
Yes.
Kendrick Lamar is not somebody that like the majority of people know and follow his music, including myself. I didn't really know his music. Okay. So I watched the halftime show and I'm kind of not getting it. Right. But, and then a lot of people immediately chimed in like, oh my God, what is this show? Nobody can relate to it. And, there were a lot of Karens out there saying that. So anyway, but I didn't say that. I was like, you know what? I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to do the research. Right. And I started looking for people who are doing commentary, who really knew their shit, right? Who were talking about the symbolism and every aspect of his show. I was blown away.
Yeah.
By the information, by the historical context, by the
poetry,
the poetry,
the music, the dance, everything.
I get chills thinking about it right now. And I was like, this is what that means. It's like, don't close yourself off to something that you don't know anything about and just pass judgment. Go learn something. Go find
learning mindset.
And be open to it and like rely on the people who have those lived experiences. Learn from them, listen to them before you pass judgment. And I seriously, I still remember that. I'm like, God, that show now means so much more to me. And I was like seriously blown away.
I think that's really great advice. And I think, unfortunately, we could go on forever, but we will have to end soon.
Yeah.
But that is such great advice. And I'll definitely try to summarize everything after I ask you the final question.
Yeah.
When will it be enough, Mei Lee? When do you think you'll be okay to say, I have done my job, I can rest?
I'm Korean.
It's a good question. I know. Koreans don't understand rest, by the way. Rest is cleaning the entire house and not going to work. That's rest.
I mean, anyway, we talked about this, right? Susan and I have had this conversation. We're like, oh God, the average person, they would chill. When they say they're going to chill, they're just going to chill. Like they're going to sit on the couch,
They're literally going to do nothing.
And we'll be like, oh, okay, we're chilling, but we're going to like do the laundry and then we're going to like wash our car, but I've gotten much better as I've aged. I've definitely like toned it down. And now, okay, so when is it going to be enough? I can't answer that because I'm always stimulated. And I think that's a journalistic side of me. I'm always curious. And I don't think that's ever going to stop. So curiosity always leads me to want to do something, like take action, right? I'm not somebody who's just curious about something and I'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I think the important thing about living life is you want to take action if you're interested, right? So I don't know if I'll ever stop doing what I feel compelled to do, but I will say this. The thing about aging, it does teach you the lesson of, I have limited time and I have limited energy, right? And so therefore I'm going to use those two things very, very wisely. That means probably toning things down and picking and really being much more selective in terms of what I choose to put my energy and time towards, right? And I think the way I decide that is this fulfilling, for me? Is it purposeful? And is it something that is going to make a positive difference, right? So, and I think those are the parameters for me now.
Yeah. I think that's beautifully said because it's kind of a formula for living life that, you live an inspired life, you live a curious life of learning, but you also don't overstretch yourself, that you are very mindful of your limitations in time and everything else.
Yeah.
And so that you spend more quality time with less people. Maybe that's it.
That for sure. And then just, the importance sometimes of just being still, right? Don't have to fill every minute.
That's learning.
Yeah, no, you don't have to fill every minute, every day. And then again, as you get older, you kind of don't feel like you have to constantly be with other people. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to be with my dog, okay?
I want to be with your dog. Let's be clear.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to do a meet and greet today with another rescue dog. I might be.
Now, see, that's a good way to spend your time.
Yes.
And, decompressing.
That's right.
So okay.
Another mama to another.
All right. This was amazing. So let me see if I can, okay, viewers, let me see if I can summarize this. Number one, really know who you are, tap into who you are, because there's a lot there that you can pull out that will feed you, nurture you, but also be an opportunity for generosity.
For sure.
Number two, love the people you love at this moment. Don't waste time. Don't think that someday you're going to go spend more time with your loved ones.
Definitely.
The time is now. Thirdly, think of ways that you can be generous with your time and your resources and your talents in a way that's going to make this world better. You don't have to fix all of the problems of the world, but you can, within your scope and realm of responsibility and control, you can make a difference wherever you are.
Yep.
And the fourth would be to rest.
Yes.
And rest can take many different forms, but it's the things that feed us, right? It's the stuff of our heart. It's the stuff that makes us feel good inside and makes other people feel good and nurtures us and them and all of us. And sometimes that's action, but sometimes that's sitting on the couch with the dog.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's dedicated time for ourselves.
And find joy every day.
And find joy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there is joy everywhere.
Yes.
And that, my friends, is the true meaning of life, according to the amazing Mei Lee, who is the guest today, who is my friend forever and my sister forever. So thank you, sister. I know. Wait.
Oh, I know. That's true.
I learned that.
Korean thing. Yes. Love you so much.
Love you too. Thanks for being on the show. And I know this is going to be an amazing one for everybody to get a lot from.
Thanks for listening to R.O.G, Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.